Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to World This Morning. I'm your host Hajra Satti and joining me is my co-host Fahim Bangesh. Assalamu alaikum Fahim.
Wa alaikum assalam Hajra, and a very good morning to you too. And viewers, today is a day that I wouldn't call a very festive or a very happy day, because Pakistanis and Kashmiris on both sides of the line of control and the world over, they're observing Black Day today, because today, this was this very day today in 1947 when the Indian Army took over Kashmir and occupied it, despite it being a conflicted zone, despite no decision was taken regarding Kashmir issue, because obviously the Muslim population was more, the ruler was a Hindu, so it was a conflicted zone. Despite all that, the Indian military was sent over here, and since then till now, we have seen nothing but bloodshed over there.
That's very true, and we've also seen that India's brutalities and India's aggression in the occupied territory has no bounds and no limits.
Exactly.
But we will obviously talk more about it. We have the entire segment dedicated to observing this Black Day, that is today on the 27th of October. But before we proceed forward, there is a very interesting package. Please don't go anywhere and just take a look there.
And viewers, that was a lovely tribute for the people of Kashmir, as today is the 27th of October, a very important day. And in this regard, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our guests for today. We have, first of all, Air Vice Marshal Retired Ijaz Malik Saab, who's an analyst on Kashmir affairs and many other things. Of course, he's a one man for all issues that we can say, and one person that I really find to be very refined and very knowledgeable. So welcome to PTV World, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I am humbled with your comments, please.
I think you truly deserve it. And joining AVM Saab, we've also been joined by Ms. Maliha Mughal. She is an analyst on Kashmir affairs and foreign policy. Assalamu alaikum, Ms. Maliha, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Now, Ijaz Saab, talking about Kashmir, talking about today's date, which is very pertinent to mention in the history of Pakistan. Kashmir is one agenda which has been unresolved since the beginning of the history of Pakistan. We have all been hearing about it since our childhoods, and even our parents have been hearing about it. But we see that there is total sort of a silence that we see, even from the United Nations and all the other big platforms that we have in the world. We don't see any action being taken on it. And India, despite its aggression, is going forward, moving forward, and calling it its personal and internal matter.
If we just go back into history, we would realize that this problem, it was purposely created.
Right.
There was an agreed formula between all parties for the partition of then colonial India under British. But British themselves, they violated, or they in a way supported in then Hindus, or you can say the Congress point of view.
Right.
Once we particularly talk about Kashmir, Kashmir was one of those over 500 princely states whose fate was to be decided based on their demography and the will of the people. It had nothing to do that who was the ruler, because conversely speaking, if you see the state of Junagadh, the state was exactly the reverse. But over there, nobody intervened to look after the interest of the ruler or the one group over there. But in this particular case, not only that Britishers, they cheated the Muslims of India, Muslim League, and in fact more particularly the Kashmiris, because first of all they were not supposed to share the partition plan, the maps, but as the history, so many authentic history books, they suggest that the partition plan was shared with Nehru. Nehru himself, being a Kashmiri pandit, he had a nostalgic attachment to, and plus he was a visionary. Let's give him the credit. And apart from so many other things, the significance of the Kashmir state was for the all future energy sources of water. They were emanating out of this smaller region. So it is very late that world realized that it was not only the land or the people that he was in love with and he wanted to be part of India. It was those resources which he wanted to be parked for a while. And what they did, the forces, the day that we are I'm sorry to say celebrated, I should say we are observing. I wish that the Kashmir issue is resolved and we sit here together and we celebrate that the 74 years old and multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions, they have been implemented, and the Kashmiris, they have been given their right to choose their fate. And I wish that we live that long to celebrate that, but in foreseeable future that's not on the radar, unfortunately. So that's why we are here to condemn not only India but the source, and in my reckoning it is the British, and it is, if you see their history, wherever they left as colonial masters, they had sown the seeds of a future conflict.
That's true.
Because they never wanted to leave any region, because these were all regions with tremendous natural resources. So they left wherever they were with some simmering conflict. Kashmir is one, issue of Palestine, for example.
Yes.
So today we blame America or Israel. They came in much later.
We have to see the root cause, yes.
We have to see the root cause, and it was the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which was, totally orchestrated by then United Kingdom.
Yes, that's very true, and I think that is the wish of every Pakistani and Kashmiri, that we live to see that day where this issue is resolved. But AVM Saab, I would like to reflect upon one of the opportunities that I think we lost as a state, because back in 2016, the grandson of Maharaja of the Kashmir, he said in the Indian Senate that my grandfather never signed an accession treaty, rather it was the defense pact, and that too for the 20 years, right? So as a state, do you think that was the lost opportunity, because a grandson of the Indian Maharaja in the Indian Senate is saying such sort of statement? That also proves our point.
Yes, and not only that, the historical, the chronology of the events, the so-called this request for accession and the instrument of accession which was signed later on, much before that, Indian forces have already landed in Srinagar.
Yes.
So, how can you, what allowed them to deploy their forces, their air force, their ground troops, who were airlifted. And another thing that the British they did was that while sharing the partition, the maps of this particular area, they modified that. And the Tehsil of Gurdaspur, which was a day earlier, people were migrating from there to India, because that was coming as per the initial design, that was coming into Pakistan. And that was the only land route available to India to be there in Kashmir Valley. So, by denying us that Tehsil of Gurdaspur, they made sure that they have a permanent all-weather road access to be there in Kashmir to do their massive deployments there.
Right, and Malia Saiba, moving on to you now. We also know that Pakistan was one of the countries who presented a dossier in the United Nations talking about all the aggressions and atrocities on the people of Kashmir, and all which has been going on, the unprovoked aggressions in Kashmir. And the whole world saw it, as a matter of fact. But we still saw no action. And since that time, since the 5th of August 2019, we have been calling it the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, yet we are still counting days and we are still watching that no action has been taken. What are your comments?
Okay, first of all, I would shed light on what Ms. Hajra asked first, instrument of accession. We shouldn't discuss whether it was signed or not, whether it existed or not, because in United Nations, India surrendered first.
Yes.
And we should stick, as Pakistan, we should stick over the resolutions of United Nations, because they are in our favor to hold the plebiscite in Jammu and Kashmir. And talking about the stance of Pakistan, Pakistan is projecting it as a humanitarian conflict, as an identity crisis ongoing in Jammu and Kashmir, and which we should keep, we should keep proposing that it is an identity crisis that is happening in Jammu and Kashmir.
I think we need to take a diversified line of thought,
yes,
right? So
because India often portrays that it's a territorial conflict between India and Pakistan. That is why many countries, they are not actually getting the image of identity crisis that is happening in Jammu and Kashmir between Kashmiri Muslims and Indian government. It's Indian political system that has dragged them from 1947 to, I would say, AK-47, because it was Kashmiris who chose peaceful way to resolve the conflict, but India perpetuated them towards violence.
Right, but Ms. Maliha, we've also seen, since you talked about how we can use more global language to highlight this issue, and I think the language or the lexicon of human rights resonates a lot with the entire global language, right? So when we talk about Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, do you think that the human rights discourse, how they're being violated there, helps this cause internationalize much? Because in Palestine, because we see lots of parallels there, right? There's a settler colonialism going on by the Israel in the Palestine. We've seen that in Kashmir, the same thing is going on in Indian legally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, right? India is eradicating the Kashmiri identity there. There's a Firan ban. There's an entire, eradication of the indigenous Muslim Kashmiri identity. They are creating lots of temples and mokshas and yatras and whatnot, and the entire cantonments are being built there to eradicate the Muslim or make him into the minority. majority there, right? So how much do you think this language of human rights is effective in internationalizing this cause?
It is very effective, and it's very important to use this international language, because we should keep calling it India illegally occupied Kashmir, because we need to tell the world that what is actually happening on ground in Jammu and Kashmir. And actually there is a need to shift the narrative. We should say that India is not Indianizing Kashmir, India is Hindutva-fying Kashmir. They are changing the identity, they are changing the cultural and all the historical places with the name of Hindus there, and all these things. This is a form of settler colonialism that is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. Yes.
Right, and Ijaz Sahab, now moving towards you, before I move on to the United Nations, there are some sane voices within India which are sort of condemning the treatment of the Kashmiris by the Indian military very badly. And we've seen, I would rather name that author like Arundhati Roy. In her books, she's very beautifully, I mean, you can get the whole imagery, the way she's written it, the way she has used those expressions.
The leftist intellectuals are condemning what is
happening. They are condemning very badly, yes. So, since there are sane voices within India, why do you think India still calls it its internal matter and internal affairs, and that nobody from the outside should come in and interfere? Whereas it's a known conflicted zone within with the United Nations resolution still unresolved.
Exactly. You know, that is what the problem is. You see how India has evolved about the Kashmir issue. As Maliha very rightly summarized, it was India who opted to go to United Nations. And now in the hindsight, we know that the sole purpose was to put that burning issue into the deep freezer of the United Nations, because they thought that later on at some stage we will be able to manipulate and take some advantage. And in the meanwhile, they sort of to give a legitimacy, they supported the then Sheikh Abdullah and then his Sians, and a sort of a puppet government was installed, which was projected by India as a elected body, which was representing the aspiration of Kashmiris, and they always referred that as a substitute of the plebiscite which was promised to the people by the United Nations multiple resolution. Then it kept on going, and in 1972 they came up with a new narrative that this is not an international issue, this is a bilateral issue, right, out of Simla Accord. Whereas as per international laws, anything which is registered or which is in process at an international fora, it cannot be, it no longer remain a bilateral issue.
Yes.
I am sorry to say, because of our own political compulsions or whosoever was supposed to do that, we did not contest it at that time. And now a stage came, the third stage of same long-term strategy came, wherein they say that this is our internal affair. And so from an international to bilateral to internal, it has taken 75 years. And what they have very, give devils its due, they have managed narrative because the word is out there to listen to them.
And their propaganda machine is very effective.
Yes. And unfortunately, it is projected as a conflict between India and Pakistan.
Yes.
Sorry, it's not like that. There are three parties. The main party is the Kashmiri people themselves. So why do we, call it a conflict between India and Pakistan? It's not a conflict between India and Pakistan. Kashmir was on 13th of August 1947. It was an independent state, and it was a separate entity. So they are the third party, and in fact they are the major party to this conflict. So Pakistan must support at all international forums that we, we will not talk about Kashmir without Kashmiris, sitting there on the table.
There has to be Kashmiri representation.
And secondly,
yes.
the point again, Maliha is very, aptly highlighted. There are multiple dimensions. There is a political dimension, there is a demographic dimension, there is a land or territorial issue, but right now it is more of a humanitarian, crisis. And this is probably the only tone which is, sellable. This is the only shade which is sellable in today's world, because you mentioned some sane voices in India, there are sane voices all over the world. Maybe the governments or multinationals who have interest, political or strategic or economic interest with India being a population over 1 billion. So, the governments may not side, but the public sentiment generally it's in favor of a free, fair plebiscite and immediate cessation of all kind of atrocities in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir.
Right. So, Ms. Maliha, we've seen, and obviously Fahim alluded to the fact that there are leftist voices within the India who are calling for this madness to stop, which is happening in India and illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But there is another diverse thought of line, because that leftist voices wants to eradicate the religion from the Muslim population there, and that's a very tough choice to do. And I think we need to be careful who we choose our allies in our struggle to internationalize or give moral support to the people of Kashmir, especially the Muslim population. But do you, so for example, this conflict is a very protracted conflict, and it has been there since 1947-48 on the United Nations agenda. It has lost the relevancy and it has lost the urgency, right? What can we do to turn the tables around? Because in 2019, when India abrogated Article 370 and 35A, we've seen that the conflict was internationalized. People were condemning them world over. It was condemned, and Pakistani state took very proactive steps in order to make sure that we highlight the issue. But somehow those voices are, I think, dying down again. So how can we make sure that we turn the tables around?
We should keep internationalizing the issue, because there is one aspect that we need to focus on, the nuclearization of South Asia. We should tell the world, we should tell all the big powers that if any mishap occurs in future, like it happened in 2019, there will be a nuclear conflict, because South Asia right now is most unstable region in the world, and both India and Pakistan are nuclear powers. I guess this dimension we need to focus on, that this is the nuclearization of South Asia, and if there will be any conflict, if we don't, if we want to resolve the conflict, the Kashmir conflict, it will be a reason to conduct a nuclear strike in South Asia.
That's very true, and that's a very, I would say, horrifying scenario, because there will be destruction on both of the sides. But thank you so much, AVM Saab, for coming here. Thank you so much, Maliha, for coming here, for highlighting the Kashmir cause and Kashmir issues. And we as Pakistanis will continue to morally and diplomatically support the Kashmiri brethren around the world, and especially those who are suffering the brutalities of Indian illegally occupied forces there in the Jammu and Kashmir.
And we as Pakistanis will continue to condemn it with our hearts and souls, not just here but all over the world, the Kashmiris and Pakistanis, for whatever is happening in India, in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir right now. We will be right back after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to World This Morning with Hajra Sati and Fahim Bangish. We had a lovely conversation regarding the Black Day that we are observing, not just in Pakistan, but the world over. And now in the second segment, we have another very interesting conversation lined up for you. And that is with Mr. John O'Reilly, who happens to be our guest for the second segment. He happens to be the head of procurement, and he is also an environmentalist. Mr. John O'Reilly, welcome to PTV World.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here in Pakistan and on the show.
Pleasure's ours, certainly. Now, Mr. John, since you are an environmentalist, you are head of procurement as well. Now, the first question that comes to mind whenever I talk to an environmentalist, Pakistan happens to be one of those countries which has the least of emissions all over the world, but its geographic position is such that it's in quite a vulnerable position when it comes to disasters, when it comes to natural calamities. So and naturally, we know that the carbon footprint of Pakistan is very, very low. What exactly is since you move around the whole world, you travel the whole world, what exactly is the world doing in order to perhaps lessen the effect or mitigate the effects of climate change for countries like Pakistan so that the effects of the negative effects of the climate change can be reduced?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think the key thing we need to focus on is really raising the awareness, the prioritization, and also the capability. Yeah. My role in the VAT group is a role which is focused and around how we work with our suppliers. So I head up procurement for the group associated to sustainability. So my focus is purely sustainability. So this is all about how do we raise the prioritization, the awareness, and the capability of the collective community, not just our own operations, but also our suppliers and our total value chain. And that's really, really important because it's complicated. But I think the only way we can do this is to recognize we need to do it together. And it's all about collaboration.
Right. So, Mr. O'Reilly, we also need to address, I think, the elephant in the room, which is the capitalism. And I do believe that this capitalism is responsible for producing so much carbon emissions around the world that we are seeing the effects of climate change occurring across the world. So, it's not just the regions like Pakistan that are affected. We are seeing that there are wildfires, there are abnormality in temperatures in the west, in the global south, in the global north. And this mind and consumption of products that are being made. So how do you think do you think it's possible that we can alter our lifestyles in a way that can be more environment friendly, and that too within the confines of what we are seeing the climate discourses taking across the world?
Absolutely. You know, I think it's all about walking the talk. You know, it's exactly why I came here today as well this week. You know, we had multiple meetings with suppliers just to talk all about focused on ESG. You know, I work in procurement, so, you know, you think I'd only be talking about commercials, you know, or costs or cash, but absolutely not. It's all about how do we raise the agenda? How do we work together? So it's all about, we have a position where in multiple places across the world where we've seen from a VAT group perspective, also from Pakistan Tobacco Company, we can see the fantastic best practices on what we've done with our own operations. You know, when we look at water recycling, we look at optimization about our own operations and ways of working. How do we share that best practice? How do we all learn from each other? And again, how do we address this problem and move forward? You know, when you look at one key point of yesterday where I was here, we had a bee supplier program, fantastic opportunity to drive business. You know, again, putting the challenge out there around sustainability, you know, so companies can really think about whether it's digital or sustainability, which can go hand in hand because it can also build more credence around data and transparency around the entire operations of what we're doing and how that impacts the environment, it impacts social, you know. It's really, really important, again, about collaboration and working together and having that joint goal. One point I'd like to mention is Pakistan Tobacco Company yesterday, it launched its first environmental, social and government report. Yeah, this is how serious we take it. So it's really, really important. And even from a VAT group perspective, this year, the ESG report was embedded into our annual report as well. So we take this really seriously. So we really need to drive momentum across the value chain.
Right. So Mr. O'Reilly, I would also like to invoke here the concept of racism and especially discuss it with the climate change discourses, because we've seen that Pakistan is a country, like he mentioned before, that has suffered the massive consequences of the climate change, which was largely produced by the Western countries because of the mindless race of the industrialization. But when we talk about reparations, when we talk about loss and damage bill, which was proposed back in the Sharm el-Sheikh COP conference, we don't see substantial actions on that, and Western countries, they are not willing to put the effort or the money into the loss and damage bill, and Pakistan suffered $40 billion of the climate losses last year because of the massive flooding that submerged 3/4 of our country. It was all inundated. So how do you respond to these calls from the global south there, in which there's a lot of racism involved, and the global north needs to take more responsibility for their actions?
Look, when we look at BAT is committed to a better tomorrow. Yeah, that's our strategy. A better tomorrow is absolutely around sustainability. It's about environment, it's about social, and it's about governance. Yeah, I've been this week in Pakistan, focusing on local operations, and it's been fantastic for me to see such progress that's been made. You know, when I look at the environmental perspective, I look at the social certifications that have been going on as well. So, you know, when we look at some of our audit partners, you know, there's multiple different external companies that come in and they'll score you on your processes and how you're protecting people on the shop floor and how you work with your employees. And this is really, really important. And we recognise how important that is. So much so that is exactly the reason why I'm here this week. You know, a few weeks ago, I was over in Bangladesh as well, because we're seeing that this is a priority here. And it's a great opportunity for these big local organisations to become global, to drive export business, because it's taken seriously. And it's really, really important for all of us.
So during your visit, has your collaboration been with just one company, or are you also liaising with other companies? Because we're talking about ethics here, we're talking about values here of business, because definitely when we talk about environment, everyone has to work together. And also, we need to address a very pressing issue as far as Pakistan is concerned, which is the mushrooming population, right? So definitely, with the mushrooming population, there is a need for more, and when there's a need for more, the capitalism also jumps in. So what do you think is the best possible solution to all these problems combined?
So this week I met with multiple suppliers. I was with Packages, Bulleh Shah, and I have plans as well later on this afternoon. But not only that, yesterday, I mentioned earlier, we launched Bee Supplier. Yeah. So Bee Supplier was an opportunity where we put challenges out to the market for current suppliers and other organisations to come forward with solutions. The solutions are around sustainability. And sustainability is not just about climate, it's about social as well, but also digitalisation. And what was fantastic to see yesterday was that we had over 20 booths and organisations being in a position to pitch their solutions. And it wasn't just Pakistan Tobacco Company there or representation from BAT Group. We also had other FMCGs there as well. Yeah. And what it created was a real focus and awareness of some fantastic proposals. And one of the proposals was very much around safety of people. Yeah. So the follow-up and the progress that was arranged after their meetings was concrete, and making sure that it was going to turn into future business as well that can protect people. Yeah. So I was really, really impressed. That's just one example. Yeah, there were so many across the booths. But what really impressed me was it really just built, again, a collective hive of opportunity of business domestically, internationally, but also addressing some really key issues from a sustainability perspective as well.
Right. So, Mr. O'Reilly, we've seen, especially the corporations, they are under attack by the green groups or environmentalists who often criticize them for indulging in a very responsible behavior and producing such massive amount of the carbon footprint in the form of the carbon emissions. And obviously, then there's another school of thought about the green groups' behavior towards highlighting this issue, because they're engaging in a vandalism. They have been destroying the very high price museum or the art pieces there just to draw attention towards the crisis that the entire humanity is facing. So how would you like to address this criticism that corporations are talking about the green environment, about the climate change discourses, but a lot of people say it is just a marketing or a PR gimmick, and they are rather whitewashing their deeds or irresponsible behavior, I would say greenwashing their behavior. So how would you address these criticism?
Yeah, look, I understand, but to be honest, when you look at it, you know, I mentioned earlier, Pakistan Tobacco Company has unveiled its new first environmental, social and governance report. We've done that because we want to offer transparency. We've done that because we want to communicate about what we've done and our commitment going forward. You know, and when we talk about the data and the reporting and the information that's in these reports, you know, we always make sure that these are verified and validated externally. You know, it's critical. So that's a key part. So for me, the big point is it's about transparency, it's about communication, it's about commitment and demonstrating that and showing that. Like I said earlier, you know, yesterday I was in this session, the event, which was fantastic. Like I said, it gave me a great opportunity to stand up there and talk about what scope 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
What do we need to do on climate change? What do we need to do on social?
Right. Also, since you speak about your company, like what I want to know is that whether there's any liaison between the other companies as well, because we want the same ethics to be applied to other companies, because there are loads operating all around the world. And now is the time, since we're, as the United Nations, the Secretary General calls it, we're moving towards global boiling. We're not in the scene of global warming anymore. So how that can be done? More cooperation, more collaboration, and more liaisoning with the other industries and other companies altogether, working with the same ethics.
Yeah, no, like I said, yeah, you've absolutely just demonstrated, yeah, in your statement. It's all about collaboration. It's about collaboration and standards, yeah? You know, it's about accelerating for a better tomorrow. It's about how do we understand how we can work together as efficiently as possible. Because this is the other thing as well. You know, we need to be mindful of the smaller organisations and make sure we bring them with us. Because, again, we need to discuss, we need to have workshops, we need to build capability, and we need to reward, you know? You know, it's about our collective commitment. It's really, really important that we have the right approach, you know, from a BAT group perspective. You know, like I said earlier, you know, when we look at some of our operations from a scope 1 and 2. So scope 1 is our own operation, scope 2 is purchased energy, scope 3 is your supplier base. On the scope 1 and 2, as a group, we are below 10% because we've been working really, really hard to bring in renewable energy to make sure our own operations are as efficient as possible. Yeah. And our focus now is very much on scope 3. So to focus on scope 3, we need to work with all of our suppliers and explain to them what we've done. What have we done? How did we, what was our approach? You have to start somewhere. So it's all about bringing people with you and again, collaborating and just building that awareness, capability and prioritization, because I think it's a fantastic opportunity as well for organizations that excel in this space, especially, you know, this week when I was talking to packages, you know, a company where they've got their end-to-end operation in one space means they're in much more control of it to drive progress. And this gives them an opportunity versus maybe some other organizations which are a little bit more complicated. So it's about how can we progress and have these different conversations on different levels to make sure that we build that capability and that prioritization and that progress.
Thank you very much, Mr. John O'Reilly, for giving us your time and valuable feedback. You're very right. Compensation, motivation has to be given to the employees of all the organizations and industries so that they would work more diligently, and also more conferences and workshops need to be conducted in this regard as far as the environment is concerned. There's a very valuable guest that we had in our second segment, and not to forget, we must thank the guests we had in our first segment as we are observing, not to forget, the 27th of October as Black Day, because this was the day when Indian military took over Kashmir. We must thank Air Vice Marshal Retired Ijaz Malik Saab. Thank you very much, sir, for coming here. And Ms. Maliha Mughal Saiba, Analyst on Kashmir Affairs and Foreign Policy. Thank you very much for being a part of our program today.
And with that, we will wrap up our segment and hope and pray that we live in a world which is more responsible and which cares for humanity more. And with that, we'll say Allah Hafiz, Juma Mubarak, and good morning.
Good morning.